Hi everyone, my name is Pao. I'm a registered dietitian and a PhD candidate at the Friedman School of Nutrition at Tufts University. So this is a presentation I gave for a lunch seminar for the Center of Enhancement for Learning and Teaching at Tufts University last week. It's about ways to nourish ourselves during these times of increased stress and anxiety. I feel like it can be useful for others too, so I decided to record and upload it on YouTube. It'll be like 15 minutes long, so it's pretty much a short talk, and I hope you get something from this lecture. And if you have questions or you want a discussion, you can post your comments under the comment section here in the YouTube in my channel. So let's go. First of all, I want you to spend like 10 seconds or 15 seconds here to think about what do you like to eat or drink when you're stressed, or like what's your comfort food? It can be anything. I would share, for me now, it's like I like to eat Talenti caramel cookie crunch gelato ice cream. So it's very tasty for me and I feel relief after I eat it. So what about yours? Interestingly, when asked about comfort foods, it tends to be the ones higher in energy, sugar, or fat. As a dietitian, I don't feel like I ever recall someone telling me they eat like kale or broccoli as a comfort food. I mean, some people may have like kale chips or like broccoli cream soup, but I would say like it's not common. Why is that? It's because our body is not able to differentiate physical and psychological stress that well. Think about like the prehistoric times when people are facing a lion or a tiger. It's either fight or flight. The body needs quick energy to be able to perform well during that stressful situation. That's kind of like a gift from our ancestors that became our instinct today. And that's just one topic in this picture about the alteration in food choice in response to acute psychological stress, leading us to crave for comfort foods in times of low mood. There are other areas in the field of nutrition and mental health that the research is being done. I think we all know, food can impact physical health through many pathways. However, food may also impact mental health through hormonal, inflammatory, and neural pathways. Actually, researchers are now more interested in how food affects mental health, but the number of studies are still small, though it's consistently increasing. So here is some evidence-based research about this topic within a slide. So first, we found that eating more simple carbs, for example, refined starch, so glycemic index is kind of like a proxy for like simple carbs to say. It's not like 100% the same, but I would say it's a proxy. These, higher dietary glycemic index is associated with higher incidence of depressive symptoms. This may be due to repeated and rapid swing in blood sugar. This blood sugar swing may lead to the release of counter-regulatory hormones like cortisol or adrenaline, which are like stress hormones and may cause changes in anxiety, irritability, and hunger. 2. When we look at a larger picture, adherence to healthful dietary patterns like the Mediterranean diet is associated with reduced risk of depression. This may be due to the anti-inflammatory properties of many foods along with the limited amount of pro-inflammatory foods like, again, we already told you, refined carbs or like saturated fats and trans fat. These kind of things may impair brain health. However, the causal role of dietary inflammation in mental health have not been established yet. 3. Newer research suggests that diet may affect mood through changes in the gut microbiome through the gut-brain axis. There's a theory that unhealthful foods stimulate low-grade systemic inflammation via altered gut microbiome. Mediterranean diet, again, can promote more favorable gut microbiome. Probiotics intake is promising, but more research is needed. Overall, however, I just want to remind that, do not miss the wood for the trees. Unhealthful dietary patterns are linked with increased risk of chronic diseases, which can also impact mental health. Also, don't forget that other lifestyles such as smoking and physical activity also impacts mental health. So, Because I mentioned a lot about Mediterranean diet, let's talk about it a bit. So basically, the Mediterranean diet is a dietary pattern consisting of mostly plant-derived foods such as fruits, vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds, with olive oil as a major source of fat. In Mediterranean diet, moderate intake of dairy products, fish, poultry, eggs, and wine are allowed. However, the intake of red meat is going to be limited. This pattern is traditionally followed by populations in the olive-growing countries and islands surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. And actually, Mediterranean diets is among the first dietary patterns being studied in a randomized controlled trial. So this is a landmark study called the Predimed study showing cardioprotective effects of Mediterranean diet. The study showed a 30% reduction in cardiovascular events within 5 years of following a Mediterranean diet. After this study, there are many more studies focusing on the health effects of Mediterranean diet. Now there are like so many studies looking at the effect on cognition, mental health, cancer, diabetes, and so on. So for now, we can say that the Mediterranean diet is one of the most healthful dietary patterns people can follow. So far, I've talked about how food impacts mental health. This is another way around. Of course, from the example question I asked, mental health can also impact food intake. Many people turn to food as a coping strategy for stress and anxiety. That creates a situation called emotional eating. I have to clarify here first that emotional eating is normal. It's one of the ways for us to cope with stress. Only when the emotional eating starts to impact other domains of health that it needs to be addressed. In cases where emotional eating is problematic, we tend to see this vicious cycle. When we have stress, we tend to find comforting, which usually be food. We eat, then we feel temporarily relief. After the positive feeling starts to fade, then we feel guilty, and that adds more stress, which will lower our stress threshold, making us more susceptible to further stress. So, how do we address this issue? As a dietitian, it's not my job definitely to do psychotherapy, but I do borrow some counseling concepts to use when I do nutrition counseling with clients. First of all, it's important to acknowledge self. As I mentioned, that emotional eating is a natural coping mechanism. It may not be good at all times, but that's all it is. Second, emotional eating does not come until we are stressed. So, how do we get stressed at first? In social psychology, part of what creates stress is from the discrepancy between the actual self and our self, or where we are standing now and where we think we should be standing. The larger the gap or the discrepancy, the more stress and anxiety. I know that current situation puts a lot of pressure on everyone, but I think it's still important to remind ourselves that balance between productivity and self-care is important. We can only do as much as we can do, and pushing yourself over a limit may actually take toll on both health and productivity. Third, even we try to minimize the discrepancy, we will still often face stress. One suggestion is to distract yourself from food. Find something that's in your interest and make time for them. It does not have to be complex or like takes a lot of time. It just needs to be something that's enjoyable and make you feel better instead of food. Fourth, if you decide to eat any food, eat with joy, not guilt or pressure. Eating foods with guilt won't fulfill your heart, though your gut may be full. People who associates food actually, with guilt have more binge eating episodes, which creates a lot of stress. So if you decide that you want to have some ice cream, just eat it without guilt. Instead of thinking that, oh, this is so fat, this is a lot of energy, this is a lot of sugar, something like that. Thinking about food, think that this food serves a purpose of making me happy. It does contain some calories, fats, and sugars, but if I eat it happily, it only takes me a piece to or a scoop to fulfill my desire. And if the overall diet, my overall dietary pattern seems to be healthful, it's totally fine to eat, a bit of ice cream or whatever sweets you crave. So For example, for me, if I crave some sweet, I'll have a small scoop of Talenti, as I mentioned earlier. I'll just eat it and move on. When I allow myself to eat ice cream whenever I really want, I don't really have cravings due to restriction. So think about when you're young, your mom says like, don't do this, don't do that. You actually will have a more, inner power to wanting to do that. It's just because restrictions create craving. You know, if you don't have that much restriction in yourself, you won't be craving as much. And again, if you have an overall dietary pattern that's helpful, it's not a big deal at all to have some sweets, to eat. And that's the first part. The second part's back to the Mediterranean diet. You can see that there are many aspects of Mediterranean diet. You don't have to overwhelm yourself and incorporate all at once. That may actually create additional stress since the discrepancy between the actual and the art self is going to be larger. So try to incorporate what you think you can do one at a time. So if you want to add more vegetables into your diet, go on. If you haven't had much fruits and you think you want to increase some, go on. If you want to replace some of the red meats with beans or tofus, go on. So for each one, think about pros and cons, for yourself, and then pick the behaviors or the ones where you can identify more pros than cons. So start from what you can do. Then set up a specific measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely mannered goal with a monitoring plan. These kind of things will help make changes easier. So overall, just a small recap here. First, I talk about how food influences mental health. High simple carbs is actually associated with worse mental well-being, but healthful dietary patterns like the Mediterranean diet is associated with better mental well-being. Therefore, incorporating elements of Mediterranean diet to improve your food intake may be a good strategy to improve your mental health. 2. Emotional eating due to stress is completely normal. This is a way to cope with stress. So strategies to help with this include like acknowledging yourself, finding alternative coping strategies, and legalizing food intake. These strategies may help with reducing the frequency and intensity of emotional eating, along with reducing the episodes of binge eating. So hopefully you got something from my talk today. It's pretty short, I know. So if you have any questions or you have any points to discuss, feel free to comment down below. And if you like this clip, please click like. If you think it's helpful for others, please click share. And if you think my channel is helpful, please subscribe to my channel here. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again later. Bye.